Hello, everyone. Welcome to another BUZZ.travel live event. My name is Markus Schäfer. I'm the CNO of BUZZ.travel. BUZZ.travel, you know it already, is the social B2B network for the travel professionals and those who serve the travel industry. With a community of verified professionals, with platforms for fam trips, travel industry rates, and a marketplace for all services and goods related to the travel industry. Today, we have a live event again, because we want to bring you value for everybody that's watching and for our members to present themselves and their services. Today, we're talking to Jean-Marc Flambert, the director of Your Tourism Partner, and he has very interesting things to tell you about marketing in crisis. Welcome, Jean-Marc.
Thank you.
So, Jean-Marc, would you like to introduce yourself a bit and what you're talking about? I know I've seen already you have prepared a great presentation for everyone. So I believe everybody will take most of information out of this talk today.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I hope everyone can see my screen. I'm going to start. So my name is Jean-Marc Flambert. I'm a Haitian Sri Lankan living in the UK. And I've had the fortune and the privilege to work with several governments within the Ministry of Tourism, based in the UK, looking after UK and Europe. At the moment, I run a company called Your Tourism Partner. We offer strategy, marketing, and representation services. And I have two clients in Sri Lanka, Tara Villas and Eco Team, and a client in Jordan, Zaman Tours. What I found very interesting over the last 15 years or so is how crisis has obviously affected our world, both man-made and nature, but how most countries after crisis has seen a huge, tremendous improvement from a tourism perspective. Also important to note when you're going through and experiencing a crisis is trying to understand what was the trigger? Why was this crisis received so much more negative publicity than another? And technology has played a big part. The tsunami was about mobile phone calls and people hanging from a tree. There was a BBC correspondent hanging from a tree, giving his report on his mobile phone. How he did it, I'm not quite sure, with water all around and a mobile phone wouldn't have been working. To the Sri Lanka war, where there were lots of text messages going around, and that was a major thing, to the Haiti earthquake with Facebook and people being trapped under rubble, but still being able to use Facebook to seek help, and then some others that I'm going to touch on. Through this crisis and handling of and being involved in various crises, I've been able to create a process which seems to have worked so far for me. And I call it Act 2, which the acronym is assessment. Get a good understanding of the crisis before you communicate. We used to talk about the golden hour. You have 1 hour to understand the crisis and get around it and decide how you're going to tackle it. But now we don't have the golden second, because while the crisis is unfolding, the world's attention, social media is capturing it in real time. So you don't have that buffer. Community, when a crisis is happening or has happened, it's how we react immediately, looking after the people directly and indirectly involved. Truth and trust. We have to be honest, and we have to seek somebody who gives a perception of being trustworthy. Having worked for governments, many of you will know you don't trust a politician. So when there's a politician being the spokesperson, it doesn't always work out. Some people are suspicious. What are they trying to hide? So it's really important to manage that and get third-party endorsement for what you're saying. And then there's updates. It's very important. The world is expecting second by second updates. They're not willing to wait a whole day to get the next briefing. So we, as the person handling the crisis, has to set that expectation and say, I'm going to give a daily update at 5 o'clock every day, or an hourly update or a weekly update, and then you have to stick to it. So if you say, I'm going to be there at 5 o'clock, even if all you do is turn up and say, I have no update, because we haven't had any further information, and that has happened in certain situations, stick to your time and deliver to that. And lastly is the whole emotional approach. Be considerate, be sensitive. Sometimes by starting to promote too early, it seemed to be insensitive. By not communicating, it seemed to be insensitive. So those are the process or the steps that I've been using. I'm not saying this is perfect. I'm just sharing with you what I've used. Now, let's take this and put it in practice. So one example is an electrocution in a pool. I found out about it at 5 o'clock in the morning. I had a call from a BBC correspondent. Luckily, it was a friendly correspondent who was only seeking to help, not seeking to sensationalize. And of course, then I contacted the head office. They were already aware, already on top of the situation. And the first thing we did was we wanted to protect the privacy of the family concerned. And we supported that family. We helped them come into the country. We provided them VIP services. We gave them the accommodation, everything we could in a practical sense to try to minimize this horrific thing that had happened to them. The Minister of Tourism led that response, and it was very important because it was a very serious issue and also a very emotive one. So the issues we had was emotions all around were running wild because it was a young girl. It was a tragic situation where electricity had been so-called tapped. So it was a fault. It was arguably a murder or manslaughter. And the family was already in bereavement from another bereavement that had happened not long before. And then, of course, we had to manage the anniversaries because the judicial process takes time. And so even after the first year, all the answers were not there. The culprits had not been fully tried. So that is also an issue. If we take another example, again, a man-made situation where passengers were held at gunpoint, cruise passengers coming off a ship were held at gunpoint. Again, it was a very rare incident. It had not happened before, but it was very real. And to those people, it would have been very, very scary. The community, those people affected were, of course, going back onto the cruise ship, and the cruise ship was taking off within an hour and a half. So there's very little time for us to support the direct victims of this situation. But we had the minister at the cruise ship, board the cruise ship, and address and speak to them and offer some consolation and some promise of strong actions. The updates directly to those affected was again hard because they were on a cruise ship. The issue being that Matt Damon, the celebrity, was having his a big event with 50, 100 guests, private charter plane, takeover of an entire hotel, and so that was then blamed, or that became the story rather than the actual incident. And unfortunately, and this is where you have to be very careful when you're speaking to the press, because I was misquoted by a journalist in the Telegraph, and who again was a friendly journalist. He spoke to me with all good intention, but then there was this article, "Lie, pants on fire." So you have to be careful because sometimes this can come back to bite you. And this is in print, it's available, and in today's world, whatever you say goes online and it's there, it's not going away. A third example is now a natural event. It was Hurricane Irma. There was a lot of miscommunication because the hurricane was heading for Antigua. Lucky for Antigua, at the very last minute, it swerved away and moved away and hit, unfortunately, the sister island, Barbuda. But of course, the press, it's one country, but two islands. So all the reports were Antigua and Barbuda, but Antigua was relatively unaffected. Because Barbuda was decimated, we had to bring the Barbudan people across to Antigua to live for a short time. So then when they spoke to the media, it was again, the tagline was live from Antigua. So it created even more confusion. What's really difficult in this situation, and the whole island's infrastructure is affected, is everyone wants to get back home tomorrow. We all want to get out of this confinement within coronavirus, and we all want to go out and go back to the pub and restaurant tomorrow, but things take time, and especially rebuilding Barbuda was naturally going to take not days and weeks, it was going to take months and years. So that was a challenge. Because of the nature of a hurricane, which went over the period of over a week, it created a lot of awareness because it was still a live, ongoing situation. And so it was gathering momentum. The people, the followers who were watching was increasing. And because it hit the US, and as they say, if anything happens in the US, it becomes big. Because it hit the US and the US struggled to cope, it then created that perception that small island states would not be able to cope. And it was true to a certain extent. So here I'm talking about the angle that Antigua, being 70% dependent on tourism, needed to get tourism back up and running as quickly as possible. One of the things that we did as the Prime Minister was adamant, despite security concerns for himself, he jumped on a helicopter and he went out to Barbuda straight away to look after his people, to assess the situation. And naturally, he took in cameras to be able to document the condition of Barbuda at the time. But that became the only high quality footage because Antigua or Barbuda was one of the first islands to be affected by Hurricane Irma, which went on for a week. All the awareness, all the news articles, everything was images of Barbuda. And I know you're not going to have sound on this, but it's important that you at least see the subtitles so you understand what we were against. So you can see from that, it was an awful, awful, devastating event that happened to Barbuda. And the people there suffered immensely and there was loss of life. So in that context, how can you then go out and say, well, actually, the sister island is relatively unaffected? If we went out too fast and too hard and said we're open for business, we're unaffected, we would have lost because people would have said, oh, you're being too insensitive. But if we didn't, then the people of Antigua would have had the secondary effect of Hurricane Irma, which is loss of income. And so, of course, before the hurricane came, we stopped the flights coming in. We were able to communicate well with the airlines so that they brought the right supplies. And this is crucial because, you know, the plane was on at Gatwick about to take off with water and blankets. And for those who've been to the Caribbean, you definitely don't need blankets. And as far as the water goes, we had plenty of water in Antigua, so we didn't need that either. But what we needed was wood and nails to fix the houses that had been affected in Barbuda. We then realized that whatever message, whatever statement, whatever press release we give out is going to fall on deaf ears because of those pictures, of that video clip you just saw, no one was going to believe us. We had zero credibility because the pictures and of the image of 40-foot containers flying and spinning in the air was in my mind, leave alone anybody else's mind. So we created our own domestic video, which was the one there, and we will have these links available to you on the rerun because I don't want to run them here, we don't have the time. But what we very importantly did, so the first one was about 2 weeks after we had a film crew, a local film crew, go out and capture the greenery, the unaffected parts of Antigua, so that people could see for themselves and we could distribute this through the travel agents and tour operators. But again, that was us presenting the image and the angles that we wanted to. So then we invited ITV in, and lucky this was something that was turned around very quickly, and they were able to share images of a very deserving two girls who came on to share their story and their plight. But from the background, what we wanted was this image, you know, to show the greenery, to show everything was okay in Antigua. And most importantly, again, talking about trust and truth, we opened our doors and we invited 8 tour operators to come in on a group tour, but we took the social media managers of each of these big tour operators so they could capture angles of the country, share it with their audiences. So again, we were getting third-party endorsement. Right, so that's a little bit about some of them, and now on to the main story, the big experience I had. And I'll start here. This is talking about the tsunami in Sri Lanka. And the day before the tsunami, on Christmas Day, I was fortunate to be one of 4 people in a helicopter, the only private helicopter in Sri Lanka at the time, where we did a little helicopter ride along the southwest coast from Colombo down to Bentota, just to enjoy the scenery. And what we didn't realize is we were capturing the last pictures and the quiet before the storm. And then this happened. If you see on the replay, the little counter on the top, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but that's telling you that it took about 90 minutes to hit Sri Lanka from Banda Aceh. And this is the devastation. On the right, you can see the railway track completely twisted. I would challenge any of you would not be able to lift one of those beams, the concrete beams that's holding the railway down. You wouldn't be able to lift one of those. So you imagine the sheer strength of the volume. The lower picture on the right is the train which was the biggest single casualty because the train was running along the tracks and most of the people in the train perished. On the left, you can see the scale and how this happened. So the top picture is the normal coastline. The second one is the water being dragged out. And in that second picture on the right, you see a two-lane road. So you can see the scale of how much the water went out. And then you can see here the water coming all the way back in and flooding so many houses. And this is another picture of boats inside the hotel reception. And this is the map to show the areas that were most affected. And this is where all the beach resorts are. Colombo, down the southwest coast, is where most of the beach resorts were. And I'm going to try this. I know you're not going to hear the sound, but I want you to see the visuals. Some of you may have seen this before, but it's again just to help you understand the sheer devastation. This was in Gaul, again captured by one high quality camera. And these are the people struggling to survive in that first stage of it. It makes me shiver, so I need to stop this. Right, so let me get back to my presentation. Brilliant. So I had just joined the tourist board. This was in December. I was going to be moving out to London to be the head of the Sri Lanka tourist board in the UK and Ireland in January, end of January. And so I was in training at the tourist board when I got a call at about 9 o'clock in the morning from my chairman to say, get to the tourist board immediately. We rushed, and because Sri Lanka had a war going on at the time, we had a lot of tragedies that were happening. We had a lot of bomb blasts, a lot of incidences that were happening in the country. So we knew that whenever major incidents happen, the number one officer, the CEO of every travel company, has to report to the tourist board. The number two and his team go to their office to manage their internal things. So there was already that understanding. So the private sector came together. We discussed what we knew. We decided that we needed to create a command center, a communication center, which I took charge of. But to be quite frank, we didn't have a plan in place, but we quickly developed one to get the right people. Who's going to man those telephones? Because everyone in the travel industry is busy looking after their private sector work. So I had to go to the clothing industry, the garment industry, to get support there. We needed to build a website, or just our website, and that our advertising agency, Beatty PR, handled. We needed to get phone lines in, try to figure out what sources of information we're going to use. How do we tap into the embassies, to the morgues, to the hospitals, to the hotels? Most of the hotels had lost their records. In the storm, not many had backups in their head offices. So we didn't even have a list of who was on island at the time in each of the hotels. We did have the manifests available from the airlines, so that also helped us. And so the first thing we did from Colombo was we realized that from reports that a lot of the southwest coast, where all those yellow dots are on the right, a lot of these areas were badly affected. And so we knew that we would be, if we send down buses, we would be bringing back anything from 10 to 20,000 people. So we sent lots of buses down. We stopped. We took a very hard decision. We said we don't want any airlines coming in with passengers because we're not ready. And you have to understand that wasn't taken lightly, because when you close a country, you close it for weeks and weeks and weeks. So, and sometimes months and months. But we knew that this was huge and we had to take decisive, quick action. We then realized, well, if we have 10 or 20,000 people coming to Colombo, the hotels in Colombo were already full. 80, 90%. We're talking about the day after Christmas. Everything is full. So where are we going to put these people till the aircraft can come in and take them out? So we secured, we started to look at what do we need to secure. And the first thing was we would need mattresses. So we literally got the police, we broke into factories because it was not only Boxing Day, it was the day of the full moon, which all shops are closed. So we went with police protection, we broke into factories and we requisitioned mattresses and we took it to our convention center. Luckily, Sri Lanka produces a lot of clothing, Gap, Next, Victoria's Secret, etc. So we were able to work with clothing manufacturers to take clothes so that we'd have clothes for people to wear because they'd just be coming off the street without their bags or anything else. Those are the days where we still had travelers checks, so we needed to have banks and ID and ways of being able to convert travelers checks into cash. We needed religious leaders there of all faiths and denominations because people were going to be arriving in complete trauma. We needed translators for language purposes. We naturally needed medical support. We needed emotional support. And where were we going to get enough people? There were volunteers, but psychologists, psychiatrists, people who had skill to calm people down, because you'd have children turning up without their parents, parents turning up without their children. You can only imagine how crazy this whole thing was. So that center at the BMICH was a tough thing. It was a big expense because we couldn't build for the mattresses, and we had to provide food, accommodation, or all kinds of services that we laid on for free. But this was probably the single biggest marketing action we did. I must be clear, this was not intended to be a marketing activity. This was just a human a reach out. We had to do it. It was our responsibility as Sri Lankans to help. But it ended up being the biggest marketing thing we could have done. And so much so that the people, I remember trying to get people to leave the facility. The planes were arriving. It was like, look, you can go home now. And they were like, no, 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 we want to stay. And many stayed and continued to live in Sri Lanka for 1 or 2 months to reach out and help those affected. Beautiful stories emerged. There was a British couple who spoke to me, and they talked about a beach boy, a boy on the beach who had been playing cricket with their children. And after this event, this was in Berula, the beach boy was the only one with a mobile phone. So there were queues of like literally 100 guests, foreign guests, needing to make phone calls and queuing on the beach behind this man who was lending his phone and giving free overseas phone calls. And so we were able to track this man many months later, and various people collected and gave money back because, he had a huge telephone bill to pay. Another story of a beggar in Colombo, and when he saw a guest going to the post office whose clothes were all tattered and he's disheveled, the beggar walked up to him and gave him, I think, 1 rupee, which isn't, which is less than 5p or 5 US cents, and said, here, take all my money because you need it more than me. And these stories really built the foundation for the recovery of Sri Lanka. So these are marketing strategies. They weren't planned. You can't plan something like that, but these were the things that built the foundation for us. The biggest issues we had during the tsunami were people leaving the country, because to get on a plane, you have to understand we were in a full-scale war at the time. The airport was manned by the Air Force. You could not, because of suicide bombers, you could not enter the airport unless you had a passport. And suddenly now people were turning up without passports, without air tickets, and that was a huge issue. While many of the hotels were able to open very soon, some in weeks and some in days, the areas around the hotels, the villages, were decimated, and you couldn't open tourism unless everybody was ready to receive tourists. The media was getting carried away. I mean, I had Sri Lankans in the UK ask me, like this picture denotes, did the water go over mountains 2,000 meters high? Because that's how big they thought this tidal wave was. And while it was awful, and it did go 100 meters, 400 meters, I think there was even a case of 800 meters in, it didn't go over skyscrapers and a massive tidal wave as pictured here. And there were a lot of well-meaning people who were trying to fundraise, many in the UK, in the US, New Zealand, Australia, who were trying to raise much needed money to help the affected people. But to do the fundraising, they were exaggerating the stories and exaggerating the deaths. And that was, while very important, it was making tourism marketing even more difficult. So just going back for a sec to the call center, we had the call center up and running within 6 hours. We had a website. We communicated to CNN, BBC, all the international news channels that this is the telephone number if you're looking for somebody. And the main purpose of this call center was to receive calls, to write down the people missing. So we would say, Mr. Smith from Bristol, we received a call from somebody saying that he or she is maybe lost. So we knew, okay, let's see if we can find amongst our found list or our safe list, whether we could find that. And we were going to the hospitals, to the morgues, trying to get lists to create that matching service. We did a great job in that, but the biggest thing that happened was we started getting lots of calls. And they kind of went like this. Hi, my name is Jane. I visited Sri Lanka 10 years ago, and I stayed, let me think now. I stayed in, I think it was Benthota. Is that how you pronounce it? Benthota? Yes, I stayed in Benthota. And which hotel, madam? I'm not sure the hotel, but there was a waiter. His name was Sunil. He was the nicest man going. And I really want to know if Sunil is okay. I'm really concerned. Is Sunil okay? And at first we were wanting to just push these calls away because they weren't part of our main purpose. Our main purpose was to help those missing and connect loved ones with those missing. But we suddenly started to record this, and because they were so frequent, we realized that our whole tourism strategy had been wrong at the time. We had been focusing on our UNESCO World Heritage sites, our nature, our tea, our cricket. We love beating the British at cricket. And it was all about the tangibles. What we had forgotten was bringing the Sri Lankan people, the face of Sri Lankans, into it. And one of the things that I didn't say, when we sent out the buses that first day within hours, 6 hours later, the buses started coming back, and they were coming back empty. We thought, oh no, this is worse than the worst thing we imagined. You know, there's no survivors from this if the buses are coming back empty. But we soon realized that actually the reason the buses were coming back empty is because the buses were going up and down the roads and there was nobody on the roads. The villagers had come onto the roads and taken the hotel guests and brought them to their homes, and they were feeding them and letting them stay in their houses. So we had to run a whole campaign on the radio to say, if you have foreigners in your house, please tell them to go back to the main road in front of the hotel that they were at so that we can bring them back into Colombo. But again, I add this story because it's yet another story of human intervention of beautiful people reaching out at their hardest points where they had no money, they had lost their homes, but looking after others. And it's a story that we are listening to right now on the news with coronavirus and so many beautiful stories. So what we had to do was first to take over a song, which was the song from Sri Lankan Airlines. And Sri Lankan Airlines created this song, We Are Sri Lankan. And what we did, and unfortunately you're not going to hear it, but I just want you to see some of the images. It was a song to unite the Sri Lankan people, because what we realized is that unless the Sri Lankan people come together and understand and support each other, it's not going to work. So it was a mix of kind of We Are the World with lots of artists singing and images of Sri Lanka. And it was really about creating a uniting call for everybody to come together and for everyone to come together and to support Sri Lanka amongst the Sri Lankans, because any recovery has to be done from within, the domestic tourism. And then there was a second video that we did. Again, you're not going to hear the footage, but I think you'll get the idea that what we did was we put the date stamp and we ran this video. And it's a series of questions and comments from visitors commenting and giving their opinion on island at that time, encouraging other visitors. Yes, for technical reasons, the sound wasn't working, so my apology. But I wanted to just show you that, and I will share those with you afterwards. So we're almost done now on the presentation. But one of the things that came out, and one of the negative stories that was being talked about, was about the situation with children and orphanages and children being smuggled out of the country, and lots of concern for children who had become orphans overnight of being protected. And it was very important. Nobody's going to come on holiday if the people in that country are sad or affected. So we had to address the children. We had to address the nationalities, because there was a war and there were different ethnic divides. So we needed to recognize that. And lastly, we needed to try to encourage people. So we ran a huge competition where we win a holiday for 10, not for one, not for two, but for 10 people. And the tagline you may not be able to read at the bottom was, in Sri Lanka, even the most stunning panoramic scenes can't compare with the width of our smiles, which is why we guarantee that while you'll be doing a lot of sightseeing, you'll be doing a lot of smiling. Think of it as a natural after effect of a perfect Sri Lankan holiday. And this was a campaign, and we had other iterations on it that went out. So really, I just want to summarize what I've been saying across the different examples I've used. Again, I want to emphasize that the Act 2 model that I've mentioned is not the best model, it's not the only model, but it's the one that I use. And it's assess, work with the community, those affected, focus on the truth, give regular updates, work with the emotional appeal, and seek a trusted face. And if you manage those, you quite often can manage your way through a crisis. And what's very interesting here is that Sri Lanka had a lot of major incidences. And so here in '87, we had a big bomb blast, again in '96, again in 2001. And you can see how tourism was affected for 2-3 years, whenever it was a man-made situation. But with the tsunami, which was arguably the worst for Sri Lanka has faced up to potentially now, we had the best ever year before, and we almost met that best ever year the year after. And that was because the people, the community, the tourism industry, not by plan, but by human nature, reached out and helped. And that's the big, big difference. And that's what we had to capitalize on our programming. So Act 2, assess, community, trust, truth and trust, updates, and emotion. Thank you very much. I hope you found that useful. And my email address is there. Always happy to speak, to give other ideas. I might have rushed through some things, so apologies if I did, and would love to hear from you. And I'm going to hand back to Marcus in case there's any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jean-Marc. This had been really interesting. I mean, we have seen so many so many pictures and information in that get us back to the memory how that was when this all came up. And I think one of the very important parts you brought up is that tourism in the end is something about people and how you treat people. And as you have said before already, I still remember this story because we have been talking about it before, about these calls. Hey, there had been this waiter. I think this is very important for everybody. Well, to love your job, and I think all travel professionals do that. So I think this is one very, very important thing for everybody. Beside, of course, all the work you did there to support the people. Because this is, of course, a huge thing to handle, and I think nobody expects something like this. So, well done. What I would like to tell our viewers, if you have questions, you are free to ask us. You have your Q&A session on the bottom line of your screen here. You can ask your question there, or you just raise your hand and you can join a call with us. Yeah, so just let us know if you would like to know anything.
And while you're doing that, I just want to touch what you just said, Marcus. So when you look at where you are today and you have, you're waiting for this crisis to blow over, and you're presumably, I'm sure you're busy, but you're struggling to know how to communicate. Is it going to be too early? Is it insensitive? your destination, your hotel may be fine, but you don't know about your customer and whether they've just lost a loved one or what situation they're in. So you don't want to be sending them a promotional message, everything is great, everything is fine, and to find that they've just lost their brother, sister, or grandmother. But you have a database, you have people who have been to your hotel, who have experienced it. They, quite frankly, couldn't care less about your brand, but they love your people. And if you are able to pull out those, give postcards to, and we love receiving the post, and in many countries the post is still working. Send me an email, I may not notice it, but if you send me a postcard or a birthday card, I'm going to remember it. So that's what you could be doing now, is creating that list of all your guests and all the birthdays, and start sending them a birthday card 1 month before their birthday. The second thing is to give free, put a stamp, get a postcard. If you can't make it, buy one off the shelf, give the stamp, 2 to each staff member, and I can guarantee you that they will have an address for past customers, because the relationship happens on that personal note, and they're telephoning, they're WhatsApping, they're Facebooking. So give them a script, give them a way to invite their friends back to visit your property.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's a good idea. I see we have a question here from David Bronx. In hindsight, and with the current communication channels, chat, apps, etc., could that have alleviated distribution of relevant information to those affected? How would you utilize that today?
I'm sorry, I didn't fully. Is it here? I'm just trying to see.
Yeah, in the Q&A section.
Could you just repeat that? Apologies, because it's not. I didn't understand the full question.
In hindsight, and with the current communication channels, chat, apps, etc., could that have alleviated distribution of relevant information to those affected? How would you utilize that today?
Oh, yes. So if you're looking back at the tsunami, absolutely. At that time, we had text messaging. I don't think we had much social media. We're talking 2004. But yes, live, everything now today is live. It's working instantaneously. We could have used it to communicate within the country to those affected. But you have to bear in mind, in a major incident, whether it is the London bombings in London, all the telephone lines, all the mobile systems went down after that. In the tsunami, most mobile phones weren't working. In the Haiti earthquake, so when a tragedy happens, especially a big one, your infrastructure, your telephone, your internet, everything goes down or it gets overloaded. So having it, and if we had it, we would have used it better for sure. But you can't rely on that because you don't know what's going to go down. And this is where it was interesting, where the phone lines saying the Haiti earthquake went down because of the overuse. Everybody's calling from overseas. There's a overcharge on it. But because so few people in Haiti use Facebook, those lines were still working because the data was not as heavy traffic as the call traffic. But yes, we would have used that differently in today's context.
That's interesting. Good to know. And another question came up. What do you have to look for to understand that is the right time to start back promoting?
That's a very, very difficult one. I wish I had that answer. I'd write a book and make lots of money.
Yeah, I believe.
I think it's gut. What's right for me may not be right for you. You have to look at your brand. You have to test the waters. The beautiful thing when you're communicating today, especially through digital media, is that you can test and you can see the response. You can put something up, only let 10 people see it, see how they react. You can do call up a past guest in your 3 main countries that you market to and say, hey guys, how's the situation going? Just wanted to ask you, if you saw this message from us, what would you think? How would you react to it? You have to bear in mind that everyone's circumstance is different, which is why, when I'm doing an email correspondence and I see that we're emailing up and down with something on business, and I see it's going up and down and turning a little bit sour, I immediately pick up the phone and I call the person, because then I can hear your voice. And this is what I like about Zoom and other things. I can see you're nodding your head, Marcus, you're understanding, you're appreciating.
Absolutely.
If I start saying, Marcus, you look very ugly, then I'm going to see a change in your voice. Okay, you're smiling because it's not true. but I'm going to see a change in your voice, and I'm going to say, okay, I better slow down because you're taking it differently. So really, I don't have a simple answer to that. You just have to go out to the market. You have to test. And the key thing is break your customer base into segments, because the way you communicate with each group is very different. And you need to bear that in mind.
Yeah, that's really true. We had one meeting that we had this topic on, for example. Maybe I can get into that a little. Well, at the moment, I think we broke it down to one sentence. It's not the time for selling at the moment. It's time for branding. Yeah, so that means to stay in people's head. Yeah, let them know what you're doing, how you are working in the crisis at the moment, what you prepare for the time after the crisis, when you're happy to see them again, and so on. There are a lot of opportunities that you have in the end to, well, not to sell, but to stay in their heads for the time after. I think this is maybe an answer as well to the question. It's just brainstorming. It just came to my mind that we had been talking about it. So
I mean, it's like Marcus, what you were saying earlier. Marcus lives in Spain, and he has a beautiful view from his balcony. And I said, Marcus, you're so lucky. You have an amazing view. He said, no, it's awful because I'm able to look at the beach, but I can't go to the beach. And this is what you do. You know, have a webcam, have live Facebook, show the sunrise, show the sunset, show the monkeys, show yourself having some amazing food, cook it in your kitchen, and say, this isn't my hotel kitchen, but this is what my food looks like. You know, make people salivate, make them want to have it, so that then they're tuned in, they're thinking about your brand. So when they're ready to buy their next holiday, they're going to book it from you.
Absolutely. And I see we have one more question. I hope I spell the name correctly. Ajit, given the current COVID-19 situation with your experience in Sri Lanka, what would be your advice to the tourism professionals in Sri Lanka in terms of taking steps to recover tourism, as tourism for us is an important lifeline?
Thank you, Ajit. I think it's a global question everybody's asking. And, you know, while Sri Lanka, I'm not sure of the latest statistic, but it might be anything from 8 to 12% of GDP is tourism. There are countries like Antigua where it's 65, 64% of GDP, and many countries around the world where tourism is far more important relatively than it is in Sri Lanka for Sri Lanka. And the biggest challenge we're going to have right now is how do we manage the two sides? You have the customer's needs and the customer's expectations, and you know they're going to want to know that when they're traveling, it's safe to travel, that they're protected, that they are moving to a country that doesn't have corona and they're not going to take a risk of getting it. On the other side, you have the host country, Sri Lanka, who are not wanting people to visit because they may be bringing the corona in. So this one is a very difficult one and outside all of our control. But what we can do now is when we get back into marketing, and I think that because the corona started in the East and has moved through the world to the West, hopefully the recovery is going to be in the East and move across to the West. So countries like Asia, Sri Lanka, the Middle East, Jordan, are going to probably recover before the rest of the world. So we have an opportunity for that part of the world. But we need to be reaching out, and everybody's desperate for business. So everybody's going to go on the one line, which is price, discount, discount, discount. But whether it's you're giving me a 90% discount or 50% discount, I still have to have my basics covered. I need to feel safe. That's important, number one. Number two is I need to have your property, your country in my top three. If you are not in the top three in the bucket list, then you're not going to exist because the visitor is not going to come to you in the next 3 years. And right now we're all in a survival mode. So what you have to focus on is how do you communicate to the world in your little way, and at least to your past guests, that you are ready. So number one, get the domestic traveler in first, because they're going to be the first ones traveling in each country. Second, get the neighbors, because somebody from China or Korea or Singapore will be in a safe country traveling to Sri Lanka before, say, the UK is ready to travel to Sri Lanka, probably, I'm not sure. And lastly, make sure that that you're going back to your repeat customers, because those are your friends. And going back to that postcard, if you can make sure that every single one of your staff, your team, the people in your village, the people in your city, the people in your town, are communicating with their friends outside. And the last part, sorry, it's a long answer, but Dubai has started a position of, I think it's P2P, Vice President P2P, people to people. And that person's or that department's job at the Dubai Tourist Board is only to engage with expats living in Dubai and encouraging them to invite their friends. So if you can go to all your foreign friends and ask them to come and visit you, if you can get all the foreigners and expats in Sri Lanka to invite their friends to come in, it's all about third-party endorsement because it's trust. I don't trust an advertising campaign, but I trust you. So if you say it's safe, Ajit, to come, I'm going to come. And if your friend says it's safe, and if their friend and their friend, so that's really what I think you need to do at this stage.
Yeah, that's absolutely the same that I think. It's always, yeah, as we mentioned before already, it's about the people. So that's a really good point on that. We have two more questions. Anna, I have seen your question. I will just get Anuruddha's question first because it relates a little to the answer that Jean-Marc already has given. So I will not forget you. I just get the topics kind of a little together, you know. Anuruddha asked, when it comes to COVID-19, you think we should speak about in communications when things are better and settled, perhaps as a reinsurance?
Anuruddha, the honest answer is I don't know. I think it really depends on the situation at the time. We look at Hertzberg's motivational and hygiene factors. And I think my belief is that all of these new things about health, cleanliness, etc., are going to go into the hygiene factor. It's not going to be something to motivate me to come and see your amazing safari camp experiences in Sri Lanka, but I think it's something that's going to, I expect that to be there. So you need to put that stamp to say that I'm certified, I'm clean, I'm green, I'm whatever, I'm COVID-19 prepared, like a new ISO standard, but you want to keep it at the bottom of the page. And then you need to give your normal messages that, you know, people can come in and see the wildlife, people can come in and whatever you sell as your USP, that's what you need to push.
Exactly. And this now leads us to the next question from Anna. The world is changing and the tourism too. Well, I think we are all on that boat. Don't you think we will need to reinvent a new kind of tourism? What are your expectations for the future tourism?
Wow, this is another one from my book. Again,
start writing.
I don't know is the honest answer. I think that yes, we are in a new world order. It's not that we're going to reinvent. I think it's been reinvented for us. The blessing in all of this horrendous tragedy that's unfolding around us is that we are protecting the environment. We're realizing now that, you know, we've had good weather in the UK for the last 1 week. We've had sun every day. That doesn't happen normally. I'm thinking there's a small percentage of that is because Heathrow Airport is shut. I'm guessing, but I'm not sure. And so I think we need to be, we have an opportunity to make sure that we don't grow back at that speed. Let's face it, we're all in business, we all depend on tourism, and I need tourism to work for my bread and butter to feed my children. But at the same time, we've overdone it. We've gone out cheap. It's ridiculous that I can go to certain destinations with flight in less than it costs to live here. And so I live in the UK for those who don't know. And so I think it is happening. We have to stand out. There's going to be a lot of casualties, and you need to ask your question, how do you exist in that new social order? And you need to constantly innovate. And you need to be sustainable. You need to look after your environment. But just look at this. We spent so much money going for travel fairs, going to do presentations with tour operators, speaking to the media. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing that beats sitting down and having a chat, shaking hands, having a beer together. I'm a firm believer in touch and interacting face to face. But you know, look how much we're achieving through businesses like BuzzFeed and others, you know, that you're able to interact, we're able to have this conversation with people from, you know, the US, Canada, Sri Lanka, Maldives, you know, all over the world. And it's fantastic. So this is one of the positives that I would take out of it. I didn't fully answer your question, and I apologize. And it's only because I don't know myself. I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, yeah, that's it's of course the huge questions that everybody asked for. I mean, in the end, we will see. It's not a good answer, of course, but I think getting all our ideas together will help create this new time. Yeah, I would like to mention, for example, next week we will have another BUZZ Live event if you want to join, and we will talk about sustainable tourism after the time of Corona. Yeah, so maybe this could be one aspect that you would like to know more about, especially regarding this question: what could come up? Is it still like the mass tourism, or is it more the sustainable independent tourism? Let's discuss that. Yeah, we will have a Q&A session afterwards there again, so feel free to join. If there's no more questions for now, as I can see, or I don't see, I would just like to mention that you all that are watching us here can join, for example, BUZZ.travel very easily, because we would like to give something to the community at the moment, to the travel industry. So we have all our premium features, for example, free of charge for 180 days. So let's hope the crisis is over then. But we would like to support each of you to grow your network, to get in touch with more people and maybe share ideas. I already heard about the first of our members that said, hey, I got a contact and we are thinking about something after Corona. So feel free to join us, share your ideas, stay up to date. I think that's the most important. We will have more live events coming up. Maybe, Jean-Marc, we can talk about it later on as well. So, because I really liked what you have been telling today, because it had been so full of information, but so it catches emotionally. And this is what I really like, because, well, you see, as I said, it stood in my head, the call, hey, there was this guy 10 years ago. It was such a nice waiter. Is he fine? I mean, these are stories that has life in them. Yeah. And this
I
is,
just need
this
to,
is so
need to
important.
add to that. I've stayed in some of the nicest hotels around the world. Every hotel I've stayed, and I've stayed at some very basic hotels around the world. Every hotel has my birthday, virtually every hotel. And only one hotel has given me a birthday card. That was a card. It was such a small hotel on the beaches of Unawatana that they couldn't afford to give me a card. So they took a card, they photocopied the card, and then they folded it so they could use the same card for 100 guests. And they sent me a birthday card in the post to my house. And I was so touched. And I talk about that all the time. But then I was in a international, we all know the brand, one of the best hotel chains in the world. I was in one of their Caribbean hotels on my birthday. I checked in the day before and I put big capitals the next day, and I didn't get a card. And they were hosting me for free because I was presenting to their hotels association, and they missed the opportunity. So, you all have those birthdays. Forget anything else. Going back to Ajit, the one thing we can all do is go and pull out those lists and prepare. It doesn't have to be a birthday card. It can be an email. It can be automated using an Excel spreadsheet and a mail merge feature. But those are some of the very basic things that we can do straight away.
Exactly. Now that you mentioned that, for example, I've been to a hotel in Kenya like 10 years ago. And last week,
there you go.
You won't believe it, I received a message on WhatsApp. They still had my number down there. A message like, hey, just wanted to ask, how are you? It's not so busy here because, well, you know why? Just tell us, are you okay? And first I didn't know the number, of course. I asked who's there, because sometimes I get my contacts cleared. So they said, yeah, we are here from this hotel, and we just remember that you have been here. And I've been there one time. Yeah, so imagine what is in my thought. Yeah, of course I will go there again, because I would like to support them. They don't have that much at the moment, but really to send a message, hey, we just wanted to ask how you are, is everything fine? I think this is not much work, but it catches everybody you reach out to. Yeah, just a small story from my side. So yeah, thanks everybody for watching. stay up to date. Jean-Marc, I think we will have a call later on as well. And let's see what else, what topics we can bring on. Maybe you have questions for later or topics that you would like us to take care of. Send us an email, contact us on BUZZ.travel, and let us know. We want to support the industry, and with your questions, we are more than happy to answer those. Yeah? Perfect. Jean-Marc, thanks a lot again. It was a pleasure having you here. And I hope we can talk again very soon.
Thank you very much. And I'm just leaving my email address down there if anybody wants to get in touch directly. Please feel free to email me.
Of course. I think we will forward emails that reach us to you, of course, as well. Yeah, just in case you missed the opportunity to see the email in the chat here, we will forward every question. Yeah. So thank you for watching, and stay safe, and let's focus on the future.